Anyway, so we're going to do a tier list that's going to show what, in my opinion, is the hardest and the easiest rooms in a CM5's environment. So obviously this would differ if you were to go to trio or solo. But yeah, this is for CM5s only. So bear with me here. I'm kind of curious to see what your guys' thoughts is going to be once I'm done with the tier list. How we doing, Susie? But yeah, let's get right into it. I'll start off with the hardest room because it's pretty easy to show what the hardest room is. How we doing, Ryan? So, right off the bat, I'll put the hardest room where it needs to be put. So, obviously it's Ulm. Ulm is the hardest room. I'm kind of happy that I could say that because, let's say you look at Tob, you can kind of argue that in Tob, Nilo could be harder than Verzik, but at least in Chambers, Ulm is a long encounter, and the amount of awareness and the many things that you can do to kind of perfect your play at Ulm is insane. So, that is why I say Ulm is the absolute hardest room in CM5s.
Based on duration, like BJSing, dropping pots, tanking, healing, like transitions, yeah.
There's just so many different things that you gotta do in Ulm to play it well, so that's why I think it is considered the hardest. Alright, what's next? I think I want to try to do it from like the bottom up, so I have to really think here and determine what I think is the easiest room.
I'd say just go left to right on the bottom and just like see where we end up. We can always like swap around rooms. Yeah.
Guardians. I would put
one of the easier rooms.
The only hard part about Guardians is just making sure you don't lose ticks. You're on the same tick with people and just making sure to like put pots where they have to be put. So I would say it's not too hard. I'll probably end up moving this at some point, but for now I just leave it as a B. So this is what I'm using for thieving.
It was like scaz.
No, I was thinking about doing it for scaz, but I mean, come on, no, just no. If it was scabs, I would put scabs here as the hardest room. But no, I'll put it as a C. The only hard part is just knowing the map. Like once you know the map, it's not too bad.
What if you include banking though?
That's actually a good point.
I think thieving is harder than Guardians because banking and like things like swapping.
Yeah, I gotta keep that in mind. Banking as a whole. So I might consider banking in these other rooms as well, because Ice Demon Procedure as this whole is like the whole boss fight. So good point. So yeah, I would say this is definitely harder. I'm wondering.
I'd keep it B, but
I'll keep it B
put Guardians C. I think.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Tightrope. The chance of dying in this room is hard, and then there's also pot rolls that need to be done, since this is after Vespela. So, I want to say I would put it... I think it's a bit harder than Guardians, because there's some things you gotta be aware of. So.
Yeah, definitely harder than Guardians. Is it harder than thieving? Like, it could be big tier, but like the first in big tier.
Whatever's closest to the letter is hardest, by the way.
Yeah, but
so putting it behind means that it's... I would say banking at thieving is a bit harder and more important than procedure at rope. There is a little bit of leeway, but even then, like, still kind of important to not fuck up the tightrope procedures.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I'll put it right there. Crabs. God. Now, here's the thing about crabs. I think you can play crabs pretty much the same way every time, and it should typically be fine. If you go on in the first tick, that's when things can get a little bit hairy. It is one of the earlier rooms, so
I'd place it D tier because it's very consistent overall.
It's pretty consistent. It does take a little bit of practice to get used to it, but once you're used to it, it's not too bad.
And like, even if you fuck up, it's like only a couple seconds.
Ice Demon. Alright, so I'm kind of thinking I want to put it like either A or like a high B.
I want to say A.
Because looking at the whole procedure, getting that down already takes a bit of time, and then the fight itself, you have a high chance of dying if, for one, you don't know how to, like, kind of keep your HP up. Some people don't chug brews right after Crab Room is done, or some people don't run the 15, so they're at, like, risk HP. So that's one thing. And then, two, just trying to bank in between hits if your prepper is a pain in the dick. The whole procedure chopping is just, it takes a lot of time. And banking as well. Banking at ice as well. Pretty important.
Not losing ticks, and the amount of harm bashes I've seen as well. Like,
yeah.
Also doing things like overload, X and everything like that. Planks.
Yeah. It's hard. Alright. Shamans. Now, I know how bad this room is. The amount of people I see get cummed on is insane. Either they die to Barney's or cum or AGS and other shit like that. I'm not sure if I'd say it's harder than ice, because once you got down the whole moving on your attack cooldown, it's a lot easier. The only time it gets harder is when you have 2 shamans on you and they're on different ticks. And it also depends on proximity. So, I would say it's either like a low A or a high B.
I'd say high B.
High B? Okay. Seed procedure is also a thing too, so I'll leave it there for now. I might consider moving it later.
Because like with shamans, it's like only the people running are like stressed, right? Like the others can AFK at the wall generally.
Alright, now we got Mutt. Now, this is definitely a high A. Definitely a high A. I consider this room as one of the harder rooms in Chambers. Like, to execute this room pretty well and not die, it's really fucking hard. Mostly just the meat tree part of it. The Mama Mutt part isn't as bad, but the meat tree part by itself is fucking difficult. Like, not losing your chop cycle, making sure you're keeping your HP high, doing hits on the Mutt, not causing a reset, etc, etc. I think this is hard. I think this is very hard. I'll go over what I consider, like, my top 3 after I'm done as well. I won't count Olm in that, because obviously Olm's going to be top 1. Tecton, I'd say D.
Yeah. Is
Tecton!
it harder than Krebs? No.
No. It's the first room. It's so easy to reset it, too.
The only 2 things you can fuck up is the lure and, like, dropping your pots close to the door. That's the only 2 things.
Yeah. That's it. That's what I consider. Now, Vasa. Yeah. That one.
I'd say S tier.
S tier?
Next to Olm. Yeah, next to Olm.
I would say it's a low S or a high A. Vasa is, as simple it is conceptually, it is by far the hardest room to execute in teams. And losing ticks in this room is much more detrimental in the fact that you can risk your own life or your teammates' lives. It can really throw them off. And on top of that, boulders. In teams, it's pretty hard to dodge those boulders. If you know what you're doing, it's not too bad. So, like, once you master it, I would even say this room could, like, go from whatever it is, S to, like, fucking D or C. But when I'm bringing in new people, this is the hardest room for them. This is the one room that they fuck up every single time. So I would say this room is the king. Now, this one is probably going to surprise you guys next, because we do have Vanguards next. So, I want to say this is right behind Mutt. Now, before you guys say anything, because I know you're going to be like, this room is really complex, there's more information to it, why am I putting it behind Mutt of all things? So, let me explain why. It is true that Vanguards is more complex, and you have to be aware of a lot more things. There's a lot more things you gotta do, there's a lot more swapping. But, the thing with Vanguards is the risk of dying is much lower. And on top of that, the execution bit, I would say is not as high. Like, sure, you have to know how to, like, 5-tick step under for the Ranger and the Major. You have to keep your eye on the other Vanguards on certain roles. But it typically plays the same way every time, and the chance of dying isn't too bad. So, I could see the arguments in saying, like, putting this above Mutt, but for now, I want to say, it is the most complex room behind Olm. Like, Olm is the most hardest and most complex. This one is definitely the most complex, but I wouldn't say it's as bad as Mutt. Mutt is really bad, and it's much easier to die in Mutt. So, that's why I'm putting it behind Mutt. Alright. Any thoughts on that toy or no?
I have some differing opinions on the A tier list right now, but we can discuss that later.
We could probably move some stuff at the end. Because I'm probably
I do think Vanguards is like one of the harder rooms in general.
Probably want to do this. That's what I'm feeling right now. Moving stuff like that right now.
But Vanguards is like more knowing what to do and then just like doing it. It's very much like following a recipe.
It's a recipe. The only time you have to break away from the recipe is when shit gets uneven. So that's when things get harder. Typically it doesn't happen too often, but it can happen sometimes. So yeah, that's why I'd say this is the most complex. Like this room is difficult in terms of complexity. I wouldn't say it's difficult in terms of execution. Okay, now we got Vespela.
That's one of the easiest rooms. You only have to wait a ticket, just do Vespela then.
It's so easy.
I would put it lowest here. Because it's harder than Crabs and Tecton, but like not that hard.
Fucking bug. And then we got Mystics.
That's like one of the easiest. No, it should definitely be easier than Shamans.
You really think so?
Like the only skill with Mystics, in my opinion, is like not overkilling and running through at the right moment. But then again, you also have to know some safe spots. But I think it's hard.
You gotta know. Shamans. I feel like it's easier to die in here than Benedict Shamans, and that's just because. So one, your overload's typically gonna run out, so you're gonna be sitting at 50 HP until your overload is done, and then even afterwards, you're gonna overload, and then you're gonna still be sitting at 50 HP. So the chances of dying in this room, if you're not communicating and trying to like swap damage, it's pretty high. And then running through as well. Like this one is more stressful on overkilling, and I just think the chances of dying in this room are just a much more higher than Shamans. Like don't get me wrong, I know the cum is bad, but like I said, once you get that moving on your cooldowns, it's really not that bad. And handling siege just comes with running it multiple times.
Do we also like look at this tier list like doing Mystics perfectly is definitely harder than Shamans?
Yeah.
Like keyword being perfectly.
That's what I'm saying. Like in regards to executing this room correctly, as well as like chances of dying, that's what I'm like kind of thinking of. It's like complexity, execution, and then like risk factors.
Yeah, I agree with Mystics being harder than. See too many people like just getting hit for no reason and overkilling like shit.
Yeah, alright, let me read chat real quick. How was CMs with Coxy? They were good. Stats for sure hardest room. How we doing, Joe? How we doing, No Monkey? Crabs S tier? No. Why the fuck is Vasa there? Because Vasa is so fucking hard. I'm still thinking I might just put it like high A, because I feel like Ulm is just its own ballpark.
It is a quick room. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say high A, but Ulm is goated.
I'm just thinking about Mutt though, if it should be that high.
I'm only putting it there because I'm thinking, like, the amount of times where Vanguards have kind of, like, gone wrong, it's... You know what, yeah, that's kind of a fair point, because there have been so many times where Vangs have gone wrong compared to Mutt, but I've seen some people just get absolutely deleted at Mutt. So...
But, like, Mutt in general just hit the tree and threw up in between chops.
Sometimes, the hard part is like, trying to maintain that chop though. Especially when you don't get an XP drop. That's when people get lost the most.
Yeah, definitely.
But, yeah, I would say the risk of dying in this room is still, one of the highest. Like, the dying in this room is probably one of the highest. And actually, no, it's the highest. It's highest. Even at Ulm, like, there is chances of dying, but, no, this is the room that you have the highest chance of dying. So, yeah, I think I'm happy with this. Vasa is S for most people. Yeah, that's why I had it like this at one point, but I'm thinking that when you're learning, it's definitely this. But once you get it down, it's like this. Because it's the same shit every fucking time. It's so easy when you get it down, but for people who don't get it down, it's pretty hard, so I'm gonna leave it like this for now. Yeah, a lot of people miss ticks on switches. They take boulders, and then, alright, well, this is my final tier list. Any thoughts, Toy, or no? Are you happy with this?
I'm happy with this.
Yeah, I would say I am probably happy with this.